I like the one where the teacher said, Charming, you got a fairy godmother. He said, no, but we got an uncle we keep a close eye on.
On August 10th, 1960, a movie premiere was held in the city of Las Vegas. The story centered on a group of former GIs who hatch a plan to rob the 5 major casinos of the Vegas Strip on New Year's Eve. It starred an aging group of friends whose main reason for doing the film was so they could hang out with one another in the city that had become their favorite playground. Getting the script to the big screen would prove to be no small task, since that group of friends was also performing 2 shows nightly in the Sands Copa Room during the duration of filming.
Nobody slept. There was no sleeping. I saw every possible show at night. We worked 8 hours a day. Everybody knew their lines without sleep. I don't know how we did it.
And due to the fact that these men were, at the time, the undisputed kings of the entertainment world, and no vice, big or small, could be denied them or their friends, among whom they could count the next President of the United States. The men were Joey Bishop, Peter Lawford, Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, and their nominal leader, Frank Sinatra. The time has come to be known simply as The Summit. The film was Ocean's 11. In 1952, there was little indication that Frank Sinatra would one day reign as the most popular and successful star in the world. In fact, there was some doubt as to whether or not he would ever find a job again in the entertainment business. It was the darkest period of his life and career.
We did a big show for television, Anything Goes. And Frank was sort of doing a little comeback, and I was very hot at the time. So we did a lot of publicity together to sort of get Frank back in the picture, you know.
The man who had once caused traffic to stop in downtown Manhattan could now walk down the street unrecognized. He didn't even have an agent. That was all about to change, however. In 1953, Sinatra waged an all-out campaign to win the role of Private Maggio in the Columbia picture From Here to Eternity. Frank won the part and an Oscar for his sensitive portrayal of the doomed private from James Jones's best-selling novel. Frank Sinatra was back in show business. By 1960, he was on top of the world, and Las Vegas was his own personal amusement park. The idea for what would eventually become Ocean's 11 had been floating around Hollywood for quite a few years. In 1955, director Gilbert Kay approached his friend, British actor Peter Lawford, with an idea for a movie about a group of army buddies who decide to pull a heist and get rich. Lawford was intrigued, but Kay also insisted on directing the movie, so Lawford passed on the idea. By 1958, Kay had still not been able to sell the concept to anyone, so he again approached his old friend Peter. This time, however, he had no demands to direct. Peter bought the idea for $10,000. It turned out to be a wise investment. Lawford had just mended fences with Frank Sinatra, after a feud that had erupted over Peter's friendship with Frank's ex-wife, Ava Gardner. But that was all in the past. Peter was now a married man, and his wife, or rather his wife's family, were people Frank Sinatra wanted to get to know. Peter Lawford, himself the son of Sir Sidney and Lady Lawford, had married into what many people considered America's royal family, the Kennedys. His wife, Patricia, was the sixth child of Joseph P. Kennedy, former ambassador to Great Britain, and the sister of the young and dashing senator from Massachusetts, John F. Kennedy. Though he had not yet announced his intentions, it was becoming apparent that JFK was about to make a bid for the White House. And Frank Sinatra and his friends would help him get there. By 1960, Frank had taken the idea for Ocean's 11 off of Peter's hands for $20,000, a part in the film at $300 a week, and 1/6 of the gross profit. Lawford's initial $10,000 investment would ultimately reap just over $500,000. Filming for the movie would take place on location in Las Vegas. The 5 major casinos had given the film company complete access to their facilities for the duration of the shoot. Or rather, they had agreed to let Frank Sinatra do whatever he wanted to do, because without him and his friends, there would be no Las Vegas.
I was interviewed to work as a chorus girl at the famous Sands Hotel. Well, I got my first car I bought in Las Vegas. And he's in the lounge area, and I come running over. Frank, would you like to go for a drive? He said, sure. And he's driving, and we get stopped by the police. The policeman leaned in, okay, let's see your license. And then he looked down and he saw who he was. So he leaned down and he said, okay, well, you know what you did there, and just don't do it again.
It was decided that Frank, Sammy, or Dean would perform every other night in the Copa Room at the Sands, since they were Vegas's biggest headliners and would be in town anyway.
Because I've got you under my skin.
But a curious thing began to happen. While Frank was on stage, Dean and Sammy couldn't resist heckling him and joining in on a few numbers.
Sing it again, I didn't hear it. Well, how many more you think he's going to do, Sam? I don't know, but he sure sing good for a white fella, don't he?
Not ones to be left out, their buddies Peter Lawford and Joey Bishop would often join in on the fun as well. Soon, the 5 were performing 2 shows a night in an informal setting.
Seeing as how we didn't get any dinner, we're going to get right on the train. Our time. Chef, whip something up for us while we're here on the stage.
Well, let's drink up and be somebody. Let's drink up and be anybody.
Word began to spread. Tickets for the shows were fast becoming the most prized possessions in town. In the first week alone, the Sands had to turn down over 18,000 reservation requests for a room that sat only 800.
He's calling a summit meeting of his own, and it's going to be a summit to top them all.
It was around this time that the media latched onto Frank's nickname for him and his friends to describe what was happening in the Copa Room, the Summit. But there was still a movie to be made. The shooting schedule for the film would have to be tailored to meet the needs and demands of its stars, who were now on an almost 24-hour schedule. That meant that no individual rat packer was expected to be on set for more than 3 hours at any given time. Not that getting them on the set for any amount of time was all that easy.
Nobody slept. There was no sleeping. There was... I saw every possible show at night. We worked 8 hours a day. Everybody knew their lines without sleep. I don't know how we did it.
A typical day consisted of shooting the scene slated, lunch, a few cocktails, the first show in the Copa Room, dinner, a few more cocktails, the second show, and then gambling and carousing until dawn, at which time most of the pack could be found in the hotel steam room decompressing.
We used to have a lot of laughs in the steam room at the Sands Hotel when Frank bought us all terry cloth robes with our names on the back, but none of our real names. Like he would put the Pope on his back. He was the Pope. Dina was the Sot. They used to love to think of him as a drunk. Sammy, Smokey the Bear, because he used to run around like little Smokey the Bear, you know. Peter Lawford, they had a question mark because they didn't even know who the hell he was.
Little food, F-U-D. We're doing 6 shows a night here. We're hungry.
How many?
Well, 2 here, 4 in the room. That's 6, Daddy. I don't care where you count it.
In fact, during the shoot in Vegas, the entire group would only be on camera one time, and that was for the closing credits. For the most part, director Louis Milestone would only get 1 rat packer, maybe 2, for any given scene. The rest would take this time to catch a few hours sleep, take a steam, gamble, and enjoy what Las Vegas had to offer, which included free chips at the casinos, free booze in the bars, and miles of beautiful legs, all attached to gorgeous showgirls. On February 7th, Senator John F. Kennedy arrived in Las Vegas on an around-the-country campaign tour. He also took time out to catch the shows in the Copa Room, featuring his brother-in-law, Peter Lawford, and his brand-new friend and supporter, Frank Sinatra. Sinatra had become such a booster for Kennedy, in fact, that some in the press redubbed he and his friends the Jack Pack. Frank would always take time out to introduce the charismatic Kennedy from the stage whenever he was in the audience.
Everyone wants to back Jack. Jack is on the right track 'cause he's got high hopes.
He also contributed a remake of his hit High Hopes with rewritten pro-Kennedy lyrics as the new campaign song. But that wouldn't be all that Sinatra would do for his friend John Kennedy. Among Frank's other associates were some whose influence was just as, if not more powerful, than that of the Kennedys. They just weren't as socially acceptable.
And would you tell us about the vice operations down in Lake County, Indiana?
Declined to answer because I honestly believe my answer might have been incriminating.
Would you tell us whether if you have opposition from anybody that you dispose of them by having them stuffed in the trunk? Is that what you do, Mr. Giancana?
Momo Salvatore Guingano was born in 1908 in the poorest section of Chicago. Enduring a brutal upbringing at the hands of his father, the young boy ran away from home at the age of 12 and joined a street gang called simply 42. At 15, he had already gained a reputation as a cold-blooded and ruthless killer. At the age of 21, he took part as the driver and one of the triggermen in the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre. By 1960, he had cemented his control over not only the Chicago mob, but on organized crime throughout the United States and Cuba. He had also Americanized his name. Momo Guingano had become Sam Giancana. Although Kennedy had grown in popularity throughout the country, his Catholic roots were still a severe hindrance in rural Protestant areas.
The question is whether I think that if I were elected president, I would be divided between 2 loyalties, my church and my state. Let me just say that I would not.
I believe I'm stating the viewpoint the Catholics in this country hold towards the happy relationship which exists between church and state.
Someone would have to ensure that those areas voted correctly. That person would be Frank Sinatra's friend, Sam Giancana. As a gift to Kennedy's campaign, Giancana and other mobsters provided $1 million in cash to Kennedy during his swing through town. They also provided 4 girls for the senator's entertainment. Filming on the movie was progressing smoothly, the only problem being that Frank and his pallies didn't like doing multiple takes. Most of the time, they would give Milestone one take, and then be off to amuse themselves in one of the casinos. So strong was Frank's aversion to doing more than one take that he had actually walked off the set of Carousel a few years before, never to return.
When he got to the set in Boothbay Harbor and he saw 2 cameras, we were doing it in CinemaScope 55, and some of the time, not all of the time, but some of the time we would have to shoot twice, the same scene twice. And, you know, Frank is known for doing one take. That's his philosophy, that's the way he feels, and he feels that's his best, is his first take. So when he saw the 2 cameras, he said, I signed to do 1 movie, not 2. And back in the car he got and back to the airport. And it was astounding to everybody.
Of the 5, Sammy and Joey were the most reliable when it came time to do their scenes. Dean, too, could be counted on to know not only his own lines, but also the lines of every other character in the script and the descriptions in between the dialogue. Frank and Peter, however, were more concerned with living it up and chasing girls.
You make me feel so young.
They played hard, and twice a night as they mounted the stage in the Copa Room, they brought the party along with them.
Get him the hell off of there! More! Keep singing it till you get it right, baby.
You make me young. You make me feel like spring sprung.
Yes?
Every time I see you grin.
What happened?
I'm such a happy individual the moment that you speak.
What do I say?
I want to go play hide and seek.
The shows were growing looser, with the heckling and jokes becoming more and more frequent. Frank even found time to plug his restaurant during Sammy's numbers. Peter and Sammy would do a dance routine that Sammy had worked up for them due to Lawford's talent as a dancer, a skill he had displayed with Jimmy Durante a few years earlier.
Spending all my money for your fancy clothes.
Though Peter couldn't sing and was more accustomed to being on a film set than a nightclub stage, he held his own against these heavyweights of the late-night circuit. Davis, on the other hand, was in his natural element, having once called Las Vegas his spiritual home. Sammy had risen to worldwide fame as part of the Will Maston Trio, which also featured his father, Sammy Davis Sr., and his uncle, Will Maston. The 3 men had been performing together on stage, screen, and television since Davis was 3 years old.
I am happy to announce that Rufus Jones has been elected the president. Where's that new president? You're here. Oh, come here, Fred. You got to say something to your constituency.
I'd be glad when you're there, I'd be glad when you're there, you. I'd be glad no gonna hide when I bring your body fire. I'd be glad when you're there,
Prior to 1960, Sammy had been subjected to racism of the worst kind in Hollywood and Las Vegas. Though he was one of the biggest draws on the Strip, Davis was not allowed to stay at or gamble in any of the casinos in which he performed, being forced to stay on the black side of town in lodgings that were little more than overpriced shacks. The sole exception was the Sands, run by Frank's old friend, Jack Entratter. Though even at this oasis, the pool had to be drained and refilled on one occasion when a group of Texas high rollers witnessed Davis taking part in the Sands' literally floating crap game. Sammy's profile at this time was further heightened by the fact that he was involved in a romantic affair with Swedish film star Mai Britt, who happened to be incredibly beautiful and incredibly white. She came to visit him during filming and had to be registered as a guest of Frank Sinatra in order to avoid conflict. A multi-talented performer, Sammy could do almost anything, from his wild dance routines to his host of celebrity impressions.
The first gentleman, Mr. Nat King Cole. Because of you, there's a song in my heart. Tony Bennett. Because of you, the sun will shine, the moon and stars will say you're mine. Mr. Jimmy Cagney. Because of you, there's a song in my heart. Smile. Smile? Get excited, boy. Get out there. I'm only out here trying to sing it.
Dean, on the other hand, was always as loose on stage as he appeared to be in real life.
I did the editing, I did the writing. It worked. He played golf.
Sure, it's Dean Martin.
It was easy. It was just easier. If he didn't have to put his mind to work, he didn't.
We won't tell Jerry.
His incredible voice belied a puckish sense of humor, and Martin could always get the audience laughing. Dean Martin was always the odd one, in his family, in his school, and eventually in the Rat Pack. He had come up in the business primarily as a singer, a crooner in the soft style of his main influence, Bing Crosby. He would sing in small nightclubs and bars, garnering good notices and annoying comparisons to another Crosby-influenced Italian singer, one Francis Albert Sinatra. It wasn't till July of 1946 that Dean Martin found his ticket to the big time. It wouldn't be a hit record, or a song, or even work with a big band that would take Dean to the top. Martin's golden opportunity came in the form of a 19-year-old Jewish comedian whose entire act at this point consisted of him lip-syncing outrageously to records. His name was Jerry Lewis. Martin was performing at the 500 Club in Atlantic City, New Jersey, on the same bill with Lewis when the skinny kid with the weird act heckled him for the first time.
All right, if you do me a favor, you and I will become friends.
I gotta do you a favor first?
That's right.
And if I do, we won't argue?
Never again.
You swear?
Swear.
Scouts honor?
Scouts honor.
Take 2 giant steps. Go back. You didn't say may I. I'm all right now.
But Dean didn't get upset. In fact, he was downright amused. And he could give back as good as he got.
Let's make it a little harder, huh? All right. You and I do a trio. A trio? What's so funny?
Where are we gonna get 4 guys?
The audience loved it. So much so that mobster Skinny D'Amato, who owned the 500 Club and who that very night had fired Jerry Lewis, now told the duo that they would be performing as a team. It was an offer they couldn't refuse. By the end of the week, people were lined up around the block to see the new team of Martin and Lewis. By the end of the year, they were commanding $15,000 a week in a time when the average person made $3,000 a year.
I tell you what, you want to come up for coffee? We ain't got any.
They were even bigger stars than Frank Sinatra. Of all the members of the Rat Pack, the one that almost everyone worried about was Joey Bishop. Many people wondered if this soft-spoken Jewish comic could hold his own with the powerhouse talents of Frank, Dean, and Sammy, as well as the movie star appeal of Peter Lawford. They needn't have concerned themselves.
Sammy Davis, Frank, and Dean weren't doing too well.
Yes.
They came to me and said, Joey, we need a name that'll work with us. I said, you got me. So we went to Vegas, and they showed them how much I wanted to help them I wouldn't even let them put my name on top. I insisted to go on the bottom.
Joey was born Joseph Abraham Gottlieb in New York City in 1908. He only weighed 2 pounds 14 ounces at birth, making him the smallest baby ever born at Fordham Hospital. At the age of 21, he had eschewed working in his father's bike shop for a job as a waiter and MC at a Chinese restaurant in Manhattan. It would be a long road to fame and fortune, but ever the scrapper, Joey managed to get himself booked into some of the biggest nightclubs of the day, including New York's famed Copacabana, where he was on the same bill as the current singing sensation, Frank Sinatra.
What won the night for me in New York at the Copa, you know, they're not waiting for me, they're waiting for Frank Sinatra to come out. And my opening line was still repeated today.
Yeah.
I looked at the audience and said, I can't believe the size of this crowd. I hope his following shows up.
Frank was impressed by Joey's timing on stage and with his ability to improvise in any given situation.
Everybody eat!
By 1960, when he was putting together his cast for Ocean's 11, Joey Bishop seemed like the perfect person to have around for the ride. Not that he didn't pull his own weight. During the famed shows in the Copa Room, Joey acted as an MC of sorts, as well as functioning as den mother and traffic cop. He was also in charge of the booze. Frank revealed later that Bishop was largely responsible for most of the jokes that the five legends told on stage, all of it subtly written to come off as spontaneous. The audiences lapped it up. Both shows each night were standing room only, and the casinos were raking in more money than even they had thought possible. Vegas was now the in place to be. It hadn't always been that way. Las Vegas started out as nothing more than a stop along the way to the orange groves and beaches of California. There seemed little hope of it ever becoming anything more than a dusty desert town with one foot in the past. That is, until Bugsy came to town. Bugsy Siegel was a man with a vision, and it was he who invented Las Vegas. At least that's how the legend goes. The truth was a little more complicated than that. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel was a member of Murder Incorporated and partners with both Salvatore Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. While it was true that Las Vegas little resembled what it would ultimately become, gambling had already been established in the city almost as soon as Nevada had made it legal, as a way of keeping the state afloat during the Great Depression. The mob, too, had already muscled its way into owning a piece of the action by the time Bugsy stepped into the desert and had his revelation. What made Siegel stand out in the history of Las Vegas was that he was the first person to see the magnitude of the potential for profit in the city. But a few changes would have to be made first. Gone would be the simple gambling dens that now inhabited the Vegas Strip, to be replaced by huge glitzy monoliths with luxury rooms, 4-star meals, and 5-star entertainment. Entertainment that would almost certainly include Bugsy's friend, Frank Sinatra. Sinatra had first met Siegel when Bugsy had come out to Hollywood to organize the West Coast operations of the mob. The kid from Hoboken was quite taken with his new gangster buddy. Frank, according to friends, would brag about Bugsy's mob connections and how dangerous he was. The hotel that Bugsy had in mind would ultimately become the Flamingo, but getting it up and running proved to be a nightmare, and Bugsy's undoing. Though he had plenty of experience in murder and extortion, Siegel was lost when it came to constructing a multi-million-dollar resort. Cost overruns plagued the project from day one, as Bugsy demanded outrageous conditions, including one that every toilet have its own individual sewer line. His East Coast partners were growing uneasy. When the casino finally opened in December of 1946, the result was an absolute disaster. Because the hotel had not yet been completed, the winners at the tables simply took their money home with them. Cash was hemorrhaging out of mob coffers at an alarming rate. Something would have to be done. On June 20th, 1947, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel was shot 6 times with a high-caliber rifle while reading his evening paper. He never knew what hit him. At almost the same instant, 2 large men representing the East Coast interests in Vegas stepped into the Flamingo and announced that Bugsy was no longer in charge. The mob streamlined what had been, up to this point, a very haphazard operation. They cut down on their construction costs, made the hotels luxury palaces, lit up the whole thing, and swung the doors wide open. Now all they needed was a bit of entertainment. Hollywood stars didn't just play Vegas, they practically lived in it.
They have everything in Las Vegas.
They gambled, drank, caroused, played, got married, and even divorced in the so-called City of Sin. They even brought the entire family with them to soak up the sun and atmosphere. Perfect digs for Frank and his pals. But even in a city full of swingers, Frank Sinatra and company stood out.
I spied a young cowboy wrapped up in white lace.
Shucks, I wouldn't put it on unless I was good at it.
They had swagger and attitude, and could, with one fell swoop of their magic hands, grant a person insider status or take it away on a whim.
We had a mutual respect, and I really had a love for this man. As a matter of fact, I even do a joke in my act where I say Frank Sinatra saved my life in 1967 in front of the Fontainebleau Hotel. 5 guys were beating me up, and I heard Frank say, "That's enough."
They had their own language, their own style, and their own way of doing things. And everyone wanted to be just like them.
When Frank goes anywhere, whoever's with him goes first class. Right. What he did not know was they all had suites on the 15th floor, and they gave me a room on the 7th floor. So he said to Sammy, run down the hall and get Joey and tell him we want to rehearse something. So Sammy says, he's not down the hall, Frank, he's on the 7th floor. Now Frank calls down and he says, if Joey Bishop isn't on the 15th floor in his suite in 5 minutes, there's no show. Now, I don't know this.
Right.
I'm in my room, here come 22 bellhops. I thought the place was on fire. And he got me up to the 15th floor in the suite.
By 1960, they had already conquered almost every medium in the entertainment industry and had decided to only do projects that would, 1, pay big money, and 2, allow them to work as little as possible and have a good time. Ocean's 11 was a perfect project in that respect. And the shows at the Sands were not so much work as an extended happy hour.
What'd you come up with, Daddy? I don't know, but I'm gonna make one more turn with this, and there ain't no writing on it. We under arrest, Daddy. Does that say LM on there? Yeah, long mother. Yeah.
Ironically, the only 2 Rat Packers who didn't drink on stage were Joey Bishop, who served as the bartender, and Dean Martin, whose reputation as a hard drinker was actually an act, and whose glass of amber liquid was in fact always apple juice.
Where you putting that? Everybody hates a smart-ass, Frank. Yeah, but everybody loves a lover. I'm with you.
That was probably the most fun I ever had. Wine, women, and song. That's what it was. It was just terrific. It was living every man's fantasy. Redheads, brunettes, blondes. It was really, really something.
The entire group even found time to do cameo appearances in the film Pepe, which was also filming in Las Vegas at the time and which starred a comedian they all respected, Latin comic sensation Cantinflas. They also managed to get many of their friends to do cameos in their picture, including their nominal mascot, Shirley MacLaine. When filming in Las Vegas was completed, the pack then reconvened in Los Angeles to complete the film.
Convention fever grips Los Angeles, where the Democrats convene.
Fortunately, that was where the Democratic National Convention was being held, so they wouldn't have to travel far to boost JFK into his party's nomination.
Let me say first that I accept the nomination of the Democratic Party.
The senator and the Rat Pack were on their way. But for Louis Milestone and Warner Brothers, there were bigger concerns than something as trivial as who would be the next leader of the free world. They had a movie to complete. Although they were now in the safe confines of Hollywood, where studio bosses and moneymen could keep a watchful eye on their investment, their cast had grown accustomed to doing things their way. And their way of doing things could be a nightmare on a movie set. At one point, when a scene was taking too long to shoot, in Frank's opinion, he merely ripped out a handful of pages from the script, tossing them to the ground and saying, "There, now we have less to do."
That's the way I run my life and my business, and generally in my own life, I try to make a decision as quickly as possible with as much integrity and as much honesty as I can put together in my being.
During one scene, which had already been done 4 times, an unheard-of number of takes for Sinatra, the sound man kept complaining about an unusual number of low-flying planes that he was picking up in his earphones. Frank grew impatient and started ranting, saying everyone knows they're goddamn airplanes, so who cares? There are just some airplanes in the scene. Dean responded by saying, "Airplanes? In a bathroom, Frank?" They waited and redid the scene.
One take. He didn't believe in a second take because, first of all, he didn't want to. Secondly, I never knew a man that had such a retentive memory as Frank Sinatra. He could remember a thing you did 20 years ago and either hold you to it or admire you for it.
The star's petulance was not the only problem facing the production. Now that they had no casinos to amuse them or women to distract them, the men of the Rat Pack soon sank into childish antics, bringing water guns and seltzer bottles onto the set and squirting each other at inappropriate times, or blowing things up with the numerous cherry bombs they now kept in their pockets for just that purpose.
We gave each other the pie. But the first one that Sammy got, I never saw a guy do a take like this. He got it from the wrong side with the bad glimmer. It came like this. And he stood like this. He didn't know what happened to him. And he had white pie, this side. This was all dark.
It's all black and
No, he thought he was going to get it face on. And he kept looking with the good glimmer, see? But he didn't know it was coming like this.
Things deteriorated to the point where Milestone, frustrated by his inability to control his actors, finally agreed to allow the cast to use cue cards rather than learn their lines, in the hopes that this would help keep the movie on schedule. By the time filming finished, Dean and Frank still owed the production one more day's work.
Frank and I seldom sing in a picture anymore. I don't know, we're not too crazy about musicals.
No, I can't believe
No, it's
that.
the truth.
Talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me.
If you're gonna laugh, go sit in the audience. We don't need you on stage. For God's sake, somebody out there talk to him.
Unfortunately, the Summit shows had by this time resurfaced in Miami and were now starting the first of a series of performances whose purposes were threefold. 1, they promoted the campaign of John F. Kennedy. 2, they brought in huge paychecks to the performers. And 3, they gave the guys a chance to get out and do what they like to do best: drink, smoke, carouse, and chase girls.
Well, Frankie boy, I hope you're happy. I'm not only happy, I'm delirious. Yeah. We got girls, girls, girls. Ah, we got girls, girls, girls.
Sammy had one particular girl that he was concerned with. By this time, he had proposed to his girlfriend, Mai Britt, and she had accepted. He had also asked Sinatra to be his best man, which his old friend was more than happy to do. There was, however, a problem. This was 1960, and Davis was a black Jew, and his betrothed, a tall, blonde, white Swede.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank the American people
for being gracious enough to give us the acceptance that they have, me professionally, and the fact that decent people in this country just say they're two human beings and let them live their own lives.
Many people were still very uncomfortable with the idea of interracial marriage in those days. In fact, it was illegal in 32 states and could bring a heavy jail sentence for not only the couple involved, but for the person who performed the ceremony as well. Add to this the fact that Sammy's best man was then a high-profile supporter of a long-shot Catholic candidate for president, and his dilemma becomes clear. The last thing that Davis wanted was to cost John F. Kennedy the presidency.
And now here are some of our friends from the Committee for the Arts of the Democratic National Committee, Mr. Sammy Davis, Jr.
It was a very real risk. When Sammy had shown up at the Democratic National Convention with his friends to sing the national anthem, he had been booed off the stage by the Mississippi delegation due to the fact that his relationship with Mai had now become public knowledge. Out of loyalty to the man who treated him as an equal even back in the 40s, Sammy called Frank and offered to postpone the wedding until after the election. Sinatra was aghast, telling his friend that there was no reason to do this and stating that he would be there to stand as Sammy's best man, regardless of the time or place.
Frank Sinatra, as a friend, he is the kind of guy that every kid in the neighborhood back east where I come from, like in New York, you had one buddy like this. Sometimes you lost touch with him and you never saw him again. But you always had one guy that you said to yourself in your heart, this is my friend. He is my friend, and he is, to me, one of the nicest human beings I've ever known in my life.
The wedding was postponed, and John Fitzgerald Kennedy became the 35th President of the United States by a razor-thin margin that included the state of Illinois, where, according to legend, dead men were allowed to vote. Twice, thanks to Sam Giancana and his friends. The Rat Pack would be on hand to crown the new King of Camelot.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
As a reward for his loyalty, Frank was placed in charge of the inaugural gala, which included some of the biggest stars from stage and screen. When he was thanked, personally, by the new president from the stage, the result was the American equivalent of a knighthood in the press's eyes.
I know we're all indebted to a great friend, Frank Sinatra. And I want he and my sister Pat's husband, Peter Lawford, to know that we're all indebted to them and we're proud to have them with us.
All of the pack turned out for the inaugural, with two notable exceptions.
Why can't I fall in love?
Sammy had been planning to go, but at the last minute was informed by Kennedy advisors that they would prefer that he not attend, so as not to offend important Southern Democrats who were key to the new administration's ability to govern.
What kind I am.
Dean, however, had never been much of a booster to begin with, and had even committed the heresy of telling Frank that the Kennedys, especially their father, were, in his opinion, nothing more than cheap Irish hucksters out for power. Though he had been invited, he politely refused to attend, saying that he was too busy. He did, however, manage to turn up at a benefit for Martin Luther King that week, with an old friend, Sammy Davis, Jr. Ocean's 11 went on to become one of the highest-grossing films of the year, and spawned a number of other movies featuring Frank Sinatra and company. Based mainly on the same formula, the films were once again little more than excuses for the guys to get together and have a good time, though all of the movies performed well financially. In the meantime, the relations between Frank and the Kennedys had soured. The president had been planning to visit Sinatra at his Palm Springs estate, a visit that prompted Frank to outfit his compound with housing for the Secret Service and a helipad for the presidential chopper. But Bobby Kennedy, now the Attorney General of the United States, concerned about Frank's connections to the Mafia, insisted that his brother stay with someone else during his stay in California. Peter Lawford was chosen to give Sinatra the bad news that the president had decided to stay with crooner Bing Crosby instead. Upon hearing this, Frank demolished the helipad that he had had built with a sledgehammer and banished Peter from his presence. Except for one brief phone call during the early hours after Frank Jr. was kidnapped in 1963, Sinatra never spoke to Lawford for the remainder of Peter's life. One day, while filming a funeral scene for the new Rat Pack movie Robin and the Seven Hoods, terrible news reached the set. The date was November 22nd, 1963, and the news had just arrived that President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated while riding in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas.
President Kennedy has been assassinated. The president is dead.
Only Peter would attend the funeral. As the 1960s drew to a close, Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack seemed ever more like an anachronism, with outdated attitudes toward women and vice. But it would not be long before they experienced a rebirth in younger generations, looking for a way to battle against the oppressive dictates of a new social order, bent on something called political correctness.
You dirty rat! You get over there!
From their point of view, Frank and his buddies were not bad guys. They were merely men out to have a good time.
Do the kingfish.
Well, the way I see the thing here, we're going to do... If all the women in Texas were as ugly as your mama, the Lone Ranger gonna be alone for a long time.
And their in-your-face attitude was refreshing to a generation that had been reared to walk on eggshells, lest they disturb anyone's feelings.
I'd like to thank the NAACP for this wonderful trophy. Put me down!
The city they had defined was not immune to the march of time either. Changes were wrought as one by one the casinos of the old school fell to the sword of progress in what could only be described as Vegas style. Las Vegas was forever changed on November 26, 1996 at 2:06 a.m. as the Strip's grand old lady, the beloved Sands Hotel and Casino, also became a victim of the New World Order. When Sammy died in 1989 and Dean in 1995, the lights of the Las Vegas Strip were shut down for a full 10 minutes to honor two men who had done so much to make the gambling capital of the world what it had become. Dean's passing left only Joey and Frank, to which Joey quipped, "Don't say anything, Frank's got connections." The lights were dimmed yet again when Sinatra himself passed into the big casino, as he called it, May 14th, 1998. The world will never forget the chairman of the board or his compatriots. They were the kings of cool. In 1960, you could have seen them for the price of a $5.95 ticket, and dinner was included with the show.